Americans love credit cards. Lenders love them even more. If you're carrying a balance at 18-20% in 2026, you are not a little behind. You are in a mathematical trap that, if you don't break it, will keep you poor for the rest of your life. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it because the numbers don't lie, and I've spent decades watching them ruin people. For years, I've told people a very simple thing. If I owed any money on a credit card at 18%, the first thing I'd do with any dollar I had would be to pay it off. It's going to be way better than any investment idea I could come up with. That is not a cute line. It's a serious warning. Here's how I look at it. At Berkshire, if someone offered me a risk-free investment that would earn 18-20% a year, I'd take every dollar I could get. It would be phenomenal. When you carry credit card debt at 18-20%, you have given your bank that same phenomenal investment with you as the asset. You are the business. They are the owner. I've said publicly that borrowing at those rates is illogical, and that if you have high-interest credit card debt, paying it down is better than any stock pick, any hot fund, any clever strategy. Why am I so blunt? Because I see the consequences. Over the years, I've received thousands of letters from people asking for help. Most of the most desperate ones fall into two buckets: a catastrophic health issue, crushing credit card debt. One is usually bad luck. The other is preventable. Let's talk about how a small balance becomes a life sentence. Imagine you owe $10,000 on a credit card at about 18-20% interest. Very common rates in the U.S. You feel like that's manageable. You make the minimum payment every month. You tell yourself you're being responsible. Here's what the math says. At around 19% interest with a 2% minimum payment, it can take around 30 years to pay off that $10,000. Over those years, you can end up paying more than $20,000 in interest alone, on top of the original $10,000. Some analyses show that with a 2% minimum at about 19%, you might pay roughly $24,000 total over 3 decades. Think about that. You borrowed $10,000, you end up sending the bank $24,000 or more. It took you 30 of your best years to get to zero. That's not a tool. That's servitude. If your APR is higher, 24% is not unusual today. The picture gets even worse. One estimate shows that making only minimum payments on $10,000 at 24% can take 29, 30 years and cost nearly $20,000 in interest if the minimum is calculated as 1% plus interest, or even $38,000 in interest with a 2.5% formula that stretches payments out over more than 50 years. This is what I mean when I say things like, if you owe $10,000 at 18%, you'll be in trouble probably the rest of your life. You're not treading water. You are sinking slowly, month after month, while the lender compounds their wealth on your back when you're young. You should be where I was. By the time I graduated, I had saved around $10,000. That became the seed of everything I later built. If instead you graduate and immediately go negative $10,000 at 18-20%, you flip the script. I started with a little capital, and compounding worked for me. You start with a little debt, and compounding works against you. You don't need a moral lecture. You need to see the machine you're feeding. At 18-20%, lenders get rich. They've bought themselves a perfect little asset. You borrowers get stuck. The harder they paddle, the more of the current goes to the bank. So what's the way out of this credit card trap? You cannot invest your way out of an 18-20% interest hole while you're still digging. There is almost nothing legal and low risk that pays that much on the investing side. That's why my advice here is very simple and very firm. First, stop seeing credit cards as a piggy bank to be raided. I once had a friend who came into some money and asked what to invest in. She had credit card debt at something like 18%. I told her, if I owed money at 18%, the first thing I'd do with any money I had would be to pay it off. Paying it off is going to be way better than any investment idea I have. She didn't like that answer. Most people don't. They'd rather hear about some stock or fund. But mathematically, she was being offered a risk-free 18% return by paying down that debt. If you're carrying balances at those rates, your first and best investment is to get rid of them. Second, lay your debts out in front of you by rate, not by emotion. Take a sheet of paper and write down every debt you owe, balance, interest rate, minimum payment. Then sort them by interest rate, highest to lowest. Credit cards at 18-25% will be at the top. Personal loans, buy now, pay later. Store cards, many of these are in the mid to high teens today. Your marching orders, if you want out of the trap, are straightforward. Make minimum payments on everything to avoid fees and defaults. Throw every extra dollar you can at the highest interest debt first. When that's gone, roll the freed up payment into the next one down the list. This is not glamorous. But the interest you stop paying is indistinguishable from money you earned on an investment, except it's guaranteed. and it's tax-free. Third, stop adding new consumer debt. You cannot bail out the boat if you're still drilling holes in the bottom. That means no new credit card balances. If you use a card, pay it in full every month. No, I deserve it purchases financed at 20%. No telling yourself that a rewards program turns 18% interest into a good deal. It doesn't. If you can't afford it without running the balance month to month, you can't afford it. Charlie, my partner, used to say, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I never go there. Financially, a pile of revolving credit card debt at 18-20% is one of those places it is much easier to stay out than to get out. Fourth, treat becoming debt-free as your first great investment victory. Once you've killed the high-interest balances, you've done something profound. You've stopped compounding in reverse. You've given yourself back hundreds of dollars a month in future cash flow. You've removed one of the top two sources of desperation I see in people's letters. Now, you can finally flip the machine around. Instead of sending $300 a month to the bank forever, you can send that $300 a month to a low-cost index fund, a retirement plan at work, a savings vehicle for a real down payment, not a maxed-out card over 20, 30 years. That same monthly amount invested at reasonable returns can make you wealthy, but not if it's hostage to 20% APR. Here's what I want you to walk away with in 2026. If you're listening to this, the credit card system is not designed for your success if you carry balances. It is designed for the lender's success. At 18-20% interest, the math is not neutral. It is actively working to keep you where you are, or worse. Getting out is not about finding a miracle stock. It's about getting serious for a few years about reversing the direction of compounding in your life. You don't have to be perfect. You do have to be decisive. List your debts. Face the interest rates. Attack the worst ones. Stop digging. Then, and only then, start building. If you do that, you won't be the 99% who spend their lives working for the credit card companies. You'll be in the 1% who saw the trap for what it was and walked away before the door slammed shut.